When you first open Maya, yours probably is gonna look different from mine, but I try to keep it almost as default as I could. It's just that over the years I have modified some of my buttons and shortcuts and stuff like that. But we're gonna be able to do the same things because I'm gonna show you where the tool is in the options. For the most part, in Maya, I always work with shortcuts and hotkeys, but I'll show you how to use the hotkeys as well as where in the menu you can find these options. The first thing we want to do is create simple cube, just to learn how to create a cube. You can go to create polygon primitives cube and it'll create a cube for you. The three hotkeys that you will definitely want to memorize off the bat is W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. These three buttons are essential. So you can scroll in, scroll out with your scroll in your mouse. If you press Alt and left click, you can rotate. I also placed a key display so that you can see my key bindings and my key presses. Alt and click rotate. Alt and right click will zoom in and out. Alt middle mouse button or scroll will pan. Once you get used to it, the first thing you want to do is click the right click. If you right click, you're gonna see a hot menu. These will let you go into any of your displays options. So on these, you have the object, which is the whole object. You have faces, so you can basically select faces on your mesh. Vertices, you can select the vertices. As you can see, they highlight every time I pass through them. Right click edges, then you can select also edges. So you have full control over your mesh. If you select, let's say, an edge and you press shift and right click, you get these options. These options are options to modify that selection. Same thing as if you were to go into edit mesh. You have these options as well here and in mesh as well. You also have mesh tools, which is these three menu tabs control everything that has to do with polygons and how to edit the meshes. And if you don't see this, is because you have here a tab that has modeling, rigging, animation, effects, rendering, and customize. If you're going to be modeling, basically select the modeling option and it'll change all these for the modeling option. You want rigging, you change it to rigging and it'll change anything between windows and I think cache is going to be what changes every time you change one of these options. Animation, so you get all these for animation, FX, same thing, and rendering. For the most part, we're gonna stick with modeling since we're not doing any of the rest. So currently we have a cube and we can navigate around it. So now we want to modify it. So there's different ways you can create this cube as well. Let's delete it. You can press create polygon cube, how we did before. We also have, if you go into these tabs, if you go into the modeling, you can press the cube. It'll also create another cube. Or the way that I do it is if nothing is selected in your screen and you press shift, right click, you get this menu, which is basically the same create menu that we went before. And I can create cube. And you can create a fast cube out of it. But you can also create all other shapes. You have cylinders, you have sphere, you have simple plane, and you notice that the plane came out black. That means the front of the plane is the gray part. This is what is called normals. The normal of this plane is facing forward. A normal is the direction in which the face is facing. So Maya indicates that with making it black when it's in the opposite direction. So if you go to the engine and you see this plane currently, you're basically not gonna see anything, because what it in the engine you have what is called backface culling, which is if the face is facing forward, whatever is behind that face is gonna be invisible. So you're not gonna be able to see it. So if I press backface culling, you're not gonna be able to see nothing. You're able to see the lines because I have the display option to show me the line. But if I uncheck it, you see it's invisible. So in Maya, for the most part, we work with backface culling off, unless we want to see how it looks with backface culling on. Going back, we also have a torus or a donut. We also have cone. Your meshes are probably coming some other orientation. Let me change that really quick because yours are probably coming this way. These are hot buttons that I created for myself. These two change the orientation of the camera. When I work by rigging characters, I use axis Z up. That's how Unreal likes their rigs. So that's how I work in Maya. But for the most part, the default is gonna be Y up. So this is what you're seeing probably on your screen. We also have a disc. You have a helix for things like springs or cables. And you also have a gear. All these are basic shapes for Maya, but you also have the option to modify them. You can modify them at the vertice, edge, or face level. And you also have, if you press T, you have this little menu. And what this little menu lets you do is modify the initial shape of your asset. So you have radius to make it large or smaller. You got the height. You got the subdivision axes, which is how many edges you're gonna need. So remember back when I was going over the concept part, the concept part had some logs. So we're gonna use these to modify those logs. So it's a pretty nice menu to have. So you have to create height geometry and for the cap as well. And all these pieces of geometry, initial geometry, have this menu. If you press T on this one, well, this one doesn't have it. This one does have it. And you can create the length, how many sides, subdivisions, cap. The spring does have it. And you can twist it, spread it, make it bigger or smaller, increase the size of it, add divisions, reduce divisions. So you can create a lot of effects with this one. The gear doesn't have nothing. Cube has it, the sphere has it, same thing, subdivisions, you can modify them, and the radius. Torus has it, you can twist them, add sections to the radius, increase the radius. Same thing with the cone. Cone does the same thing. Cap doesn't. We'll delete all of these and we're gonna start making our first wall. So for our first wall, the first thing I want to create is go to create polygons cube. I could do the hotkey as well. We were gonna press scale, but I remember press T and you get the little help menu. And I want this wall to be 300 units high. The reason I do 300 units high is because I'm thinking of the level of the player. A website that actually helps you with the level of the player is this website. Helps you with the level, the measurements of walls and stuff like that. You can write it down where world of level design. In here it explains how scale in Unreal and scale in Maya works. Same, they work in centimeters. Same thing as on Unity. If you're going into Unity use meters, but it's easy to convert, and it tells you exactly what the height when it comes to the actual character, because these are real world heights. So I'm using 300 in the width. I'll use 200. That's half of the wall, and then a full wall is 400. So I'll use 200, and then I'll use 2 because we're not gonna have an interior, and eventually I'll probably delete the inside of the wall. So we're gonna have this wall, and once you have this shape for the wall, what we want to do is rename it. So I'll rename it as stone wall, and then I'll put the measurements on it. 200 times 300. That way I know what's the measurement of this wall. For the most part, almost every artist out there use prefixes, which in this case, this is a SM, which stands for static mesh. Static mesh means that the mesh will not be interacted with or is not gonna move. It's a static mesh. There's also SK, which is skeletal mesh, which is for meshes that have skeletons that are gonna be animated. So in this case, I'll rename it to SM stone wall 200 by 300. So now we have one wall done. We'll press W, and there's a thing that every mesh has, which is a pivot. The pivot is basically where the center, or where you want the mesh to be interacted with or snap to. If you press the button D, you go into edit pivot mode, and you can be, if you move it, you see that the mesh doesn't move, but the pivot does move. So what we want to do is, when you use the T menu, it'll scale the object, but the pivot stays in the center. So what you want to do is you grab the pivot and you want to move it to the floor so that you can put your bottom of your wall into the floor. Because right now, if you bring this into any engine, Unity or Unreal, you're gonna have half of the wall, because the center is going to be placed at 0, 0, 0, so it's gonna be under the floor. So half is gonna be under the floor, half is gonna be above the floor. So you always want to edit your pivots so that the lowest point of your mesh is the pivot. So we want to press D, And you know when you're in pivot edition mode, because on normal mode you have this square, but when you press D, you have the move and the rotate gizmo unlocked at the same time. What I want to do is, if you see that when you pass your mouse around any border, it says align. If you press right now on any of these edges, what is going to do is that the pivot is gonna move to that line, but at the same time is going to go in the direction of the edge. So if you click on any of these edges, the pivot is just going to shoot straight in the direction of the edge. If you wanna reset, if you made a mistake and your orientations of your mesh, of your pivot is wrong, all you want to do, if you want it in the center back, you can go into modify, center pivot. It's gonna go into the center. But you notice that the orientation is wrong. It's not like it used to be. To fix that, you double click on the move tool, right? And you're gonna get this menu. And you're gonna see that the axis orientation is custom. What you wanna do is press reset and it'll go back to normal. And then you close this option. So let's try it again. You press D, and then if you just want it to align with the bottom, you can press any direction, just click on it, any axis, and you'll see it'll turn yellow. So I want it on the Y. And then if I press shift, you're gonna see position Y. So it's just gonna grab the position Y and translate in that specific axis. And then I'll press the edge and my whole gizmo came down in the same axes, disregarding the other two axes. And then I'll press D and I'll have my gizmo or pivot on the bottom of the mesh. So then all I want to do is grab my mesh with W and move it up to the floor. Now, how do you know it's on the actual floor? So then Maya has this shortcut that gives you all the windows. You can also see it in panels and layouts for panels. Or if you press the space bar, it'll jump from one to the others. And then depending on where your mouse is, you're going to select that view. So if I press here and press space bar again, it'll select that. Space bar, space bar. So then we want to go into the side or the front, and then place it on 0. And you might see the way I access this menu is Control A. With Control A, I was able to switch between the attribute editor and the channel box. Attribute editor, well, the channel box first. Channel box has all the translation and rotation and scale values of that specific mesh. So let's say I'm here and I rotate my mesh and move it, you'll see it'll have all these values recorded. This is called history. Once you move a mesh, the mesh has what is known as history. If you want to reset the values, then there's one button called modify, freeze transformation. When you press on it, it'll reset your pivot, it'll reset all your transforms and rotation values. That means that the new origin position of this mesh is going to be where you left it. So if you want to return it back to 0, 0, 0, you will have to do it manually. So before you do freeze transformation to get rid of like all this history and delete history, you want to place your mesh where you want it to be. So right now, if I do 0, 0, 0 and move in the Y 150, is going to be at 0, 0, 0. But we don't know for sure if it's at 0 by looking at this specific. If you scale up, you might see that the lines are not lining perfectly. So to make sure, if you press X and you click and drag, you're going to be snapping into the grid. So this yellow line, the center is 0, 0, 0. So, or the origin. So then you snap it into the ground and it's actually 150. So now that we have this, we can freeze the transformation, modify, freeze transformation. And then we have all this history. And then we go to edit, delete by type, history. So now we have a clean mesh that we can work with.